The Craigslist listing. It started with a Craigslist ad. 1BR apartment, $450 per month, all utilities included, no deposit, immediate move-in. Theo sat at the corner of his favorite campus cafe, sipping cheap black coffee while scrolling through apartment listings. Rent in the city was brutal. He'd been crashing on a friend's couch for weeks, and with midterms approaching, he needed his own space somewhere quiet, cheap, and available now. The listing seemed unreal. The pictures were grainy, maybe even taken on a flip phone, but they showed a modest, vintage-style apartment. Wooden floors, exposed brick, old but clean kitchen appliances. There was no building name listed, just an address, 1836 Renfield Street, about a 15-minute bus ride from campus.
He hesitated.
No deposit.
No credit check.
That usually screamed scam or murder basement. But something about it pulled at him. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe it was how the final line of the post read.
Don't worry.
You'll fit right in. Theo called the number listed.
It rang twice.
A man's voice answered.
Want the unit? No greeting. No name.
Yumie. The one-bedroom at Renfield. It's still available.
Come by today.
Bring cash for first month. And just like that, Theo was en route to the address, his duffel bag packed with his laptop, 2 days' worth of clothes, and $450 in crumpled 20s. The building stood alone at the edge of an old neighborhood, part industrial, part forgotten. Rows of closed storefronts lined the street like a graveyard of businesses that didn't make it past the early 2000s. There were no kids playing outside.
No barking dogs.
Not even the sound of traffic. 1836 Renfield was a narrow, red brick building wedged between a boarded-up bodega and an alley with a single rusting dumpster. A faded sign above the door read simply, "The Merrow."
CO buzzed the intercom. A crackling sound, then silence.
He buzzed again. The door clicked open on its own. Inside, the lobby was small, only a chair with torn upholstery, a mail slot cabinet missing half its labels, and a hallway that stretched toward an old elevator. The air was thick with a musty, metallic scent. It smelled wet, like someone had just mopped the floor with cold water and forgot to dry it. A man stepped out of the elevator as Theo approached. Tall, gaunt, wearing a gray coat despite the summer heat. His eyes were a cloudy gray, like fogged glass. He didn't smile. "You're the one who called?" he asked. Theo nodded. "Yeah, about the unit." The man didn't offer a name, just motioned with his hand for Theo to follow.
They rode the elevator in silence to the third floor.
The doors opened with a mechanical groan, revealing a dim hallway with peeling wallpaper and overhead lights that flickered every few seconds. The man led him to apartment 3A. The door was already open. Inside, the unit was exactly as pictured. Small but cozy. The living room had a bay window overlooking the alley. The kitchen was cramped but functional. The bedroom smelled faintly of old lavender. The walls were off-white with a few scratches, but no visible damage or mold. It was better than any of the student apartments Theo had toured. "This is it," the man said. "No lease. Month to month. Rent's due on the 1st.
Slip it under the door marked B1 in the basement. CO blinked.
Wait, that's it?
No paper.
No need.
If you're here, the apartment wants you. CO gave a number slip.
Ah, cool. Do I get a key? The man held out an old brass key attached to a tag labeled 3A. His fingers were long and dry, nails yellowed. "You'll hear things," he said flatly, as if quoting a line he'd said 100 times. Ignore them.
Don't open your door after midnight. No visitors after dark. And don't go to the fifth floor. She stared.
There is no fifth floor, right? The man didn't answer. He turned and walked away. That night, Theo unpacked, trying to shake off the odd vibes. The silence was almost comforting after weeks of couch surfing and listening to other people's TVs and snoring and late-night arguments. The apartment felt like a sanctuary. He FaceTimed his sister to show her the place. It's old, but I think I got lucky, he said. You always pick creepy buildings, she teased. You're gonna end up in a BuzzFeed unsolved episode. He laughed.
If I vanish, I'll leave a note.
Promise. But as he hung up and looked around the apartment, a strange feeling settled over him. It wasn't fear. It was expectation. Like the room was waiting.
At 오전 3시 11분, 시오
He didn't know why. The room was quiet, and yet something was off. He listened. Knock. Knock. Knock.
The sound came from the door.
Not a pounding.
Just 3 slow, deliberate knocks.
He froze.
She sat up in bed, heart thudding.
Maybe it was the neighbor. Maybe someone got the wrong apartment. Or maybe it was a prank. He checked his phone. No messages. No missed calls. The time blinked back at him. 3:11 a.m. exactly. He crept to the door and peered through the peephole. No one. He opened it a crack. The hallway was empty. Only the buzzing of the flickering overhead light, and a faint draft. He shut the door and locked. The next morning, he asked the man in 3-ban older guy with big glasses and a pipe if he'd heard anything weird last night. The man just looked at him for a long second and said, "Third floor's usually quiet. Until it isn't." Then he shut his door. Over the next week, Theo tried to settle in. He set up a study nook in the corner, made instant noodles at night, and binge-watched old horror movies, ironically, to relax. But the building refused to feel like home. Small things started to go wrong. His phone charger went missing twice, only to reappear in the freezer. The faucet would turn on by itself in the middle of the night. His alarm kept resetting itself to 3:11 a.m., even when he deleted and remade it. And then there were the neighbors. He rarely saw anyone leave their apartments. Once, he passed a woman on the second floor staring blankly out the mailroom window. She didn't blink, didn't speak. Another time, he swore he saw someone standing in the stairwell shadows as he climbed up with groceries, but when he turned, no one was there. And still, each night, at 3:11 a.m., the knocking returned.
3 knocks.
No more. No less. Always slow. Always patient. He stopped checking the peephole. On the 8th night, something changed. Theo, wide awake from anxiety and coffee, waited in the living room. The clock ticked to 3:11. Knock. 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 This time, he ran to the door and yanked it open immediately. No one. Just the hallway. Still. Silent. Except a package sat at his feet. Small. Wrapped in brown paper.
No name. No label.
He brought it inside with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a photograph.
An old Polaroid.
Blurry. Sepia-toned. It showed a man standing in his apartment, the same furniture, same curtains, even the same rug. But the man in the photo wasn't him. He looked pale, almost gray. His eyes hollow. He was staring at the camera like he knew who was holding it. Written on the back, in smudged ink. He said the apartment chose him too. Theo didn't sleep after that. And the next night, the knocking changed. It came from inside the walls. The first night's knock. The first knock came at 3:11 a.m. Theo's phone screen glowed on his nightstand, illuminating the room with that pale blue LED hue that never felt natural. His eyes opened instinctively, chest heavy from sleep paralysis, or maybe it was just the weight of the building pressing down on him again. Knock. He blinked. Was that real? Knock. Knock. It was deliberate.
3 슬로 탭스.
Not pounding. Not urgent.
Just patient.
Theo sát úp.
The knocking had stopped, but its echo remained, running a cold line down his spine. The hallway was silent, save for the faint hum of an overhead bulb that hadn't stopped flickering since he moved in. He rolled out of bed, heart thudding louder than his footsteps. The floor creaked softly beneath him as he approached the apartment door. Everything in his body told him not to open it. He listened through the wood. Silence. He leaned in, one eye to the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But as he pulled away from the door, he heard something faint.
Almost too quiet to be real static whisper.
Not from outside. From inside.
Hughes phone buzzed. A motion alert.
He had installed a cheap security cam app earlier that day and mounted his phone facing the door. He tapped the notification with trembling fingers.
The footage loaded.
At exactly 3:11 a.m., the camera had activated. The hallway should have been visible through the fisheye lens. But instead, there was only static.
A 시골 of black and gray snow. Then, for just a moment, a single frame flickered through. A shape just barely visible.
A figure.
Standing outside the door.
Then gone.
Hughes dress coat.
He replayed it. Same result. The timestamp didn't lie.
오전 3시 11분.
Knock. Static. Figure. Gone. He backed away from the door and grabbed the heavy wooden chair by the table.
He jammed it under the doorknob.
His hands were cold and sweaty. He didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Theo tried to brush it off as a glitch. A ghost of corrupted data. Maybe a neighbor had come to the wrong door, though he hadn't heard anyone else moving in. And besides, he'd barely seen anyone since arriving. The old woman in 3C, the guy with the pipe in 3B. That was it. Still, just to be sure, he checked the hallway. Nothing seemed off. But when he passed 3C's door, it was wide open. Not cracked. Wide.
Open.
Theo stopped. "Hello," he called gently. No response. The apartment was nearly empty. No furniture.
No signs of life.
Just a thin layer of dust coating the hardwood. Even the air felt dead. Theo backed away, heart pounding. He went downstairs to the mailbox room, hoping to see if the landlord had left anything. But the box labeled 3A was jammed shut, already full. When he forced it open, he found dozens of unopened envelopes, all addressed to different names. None of them were his. All the same unit. All different people. Some of the envelopes looked recent. Others were yellowed, frayed, and dated as far back as 2003. Theo shoved them back in and shut the box hard. That evening, he knocked on 3B. The man answered slowly, looking through the chain. "Yes?" he asked, pipe between his teeth.
Shio hesitated. Did you hear knocking last night?
The man just stared at him. Then, without a word, he shut the door. Theo stood there, heart racing, his questions still hanging in the stale hallway air. That night, Theo kept the lights on. He drank 2 energy drinks to keep himself awake and set up his phone again to face the door, recording continuously. He even placed his laptop nearby, running a live webcam feed. The clock ticked to 3 a.m. 10 minutes. 9. 8. At 3:10, Theo's screen flickered. The live stream glitched, momentarily skipping back 2 seconds. His phone's screen dimmed.
댄스리 낙스.
Exactly the same. Even paced.
할로.
Solid. He stood frozen, this time with a kitchen knife in his hand. The sound had come directly from the door again.
No mistaking it.
The live stream camera feed froze entirely. He inched toward the door, phone in his other hand, and pressed his eye to the peephole again. Nothing. But then,
A paint scratching.
not at the door.
Inside the holes. Like fingernails dragging behind the paint.
Theo jerked back and stared at the door, half expecting it to fly open. It didn't. He backed away slowly and turned off the recording. He reviewed the footage immediately. And again at exactly 3:11 a.m., the video corrupted. This time, however, there was more than static. There was audio. A distorted voice. Garbled.
Almost in reverse. Playing just under the static.
Theo isolated it. Ran it through an audio program. He reversed the sound file and adjusted the pitch. What played back sent a chill through his body. Let me in.
3 words.
Slow. Drawn out. Whispered like someone standing right next to the mic. He didn't sleep again. The next day, he called the number that had been listed in the Craigslist ad. It rang twice, then disconnected. He tried again. This time, it rang once and played a robotic message. This number is no longer in service. He Googled the building. The Merrow 1836 Renfield Street.
No management website.
No reviews. No digital trace beyond an old Street View photo from 2014. But then he stumbled on a Reddit thread from 5 years ago, buried in /unresolved mysteries. Title, 1836 Renfield Don't Move In. My cousin moved into this place in 2018.
He visited once.
He said strange stuff happened. Knocking at night, voices in the elevator, flickering lights. Then he stopped answering our calls. Cops didn't help. Apartment manager said he moved out. But his stuff was still inside. Mattress made. Dishes in the sink. His name was still on the buzzer. We never found him. There were only 2 replies. One had since been deleted. The other simply said,
Check the holes.
Theo's heart pounded as he stared at the screen. He shut his laptop and looked around his apartment. The walls looked normal. Slightly chipped paint. Old water stains.
Nothing dramatic.
But something was there. He could feel it now.
Something just beneath the surface.
He placed his ear against the far wall near the bed. Silence. Then, a breath. Not his.
Just the softest exhale. Like lungs pressed against the plaster.
Theo stumbled back, knocking over a lamp.
The bulb shattered on impact.
For a moment, darkness rushed in like water. When he turned on another light, the room felt smaller. Like the walls had shifted. Like they were breathing. Later that day, he saw someone new moving into the building. A young woman, dragging 2 heavy suitcases toward the stairs. Theo hesitated, then approached her. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Moving in." She looked up, smiling. "Yeah. Got a deal I couldn't pass up. Unit 3C. Theo froze. Did someone just move out?
덕을 shrugged. I don't know.
The guy I spoke to said it had been empty for a while. Theo looked up at the third floor hallway window.
커턴즈 플러터드 비하인드 더 글래스.
But 3C had been occupied, just 2 days ago, by that quiet, pale woman who told him, "Leave before it chooses you." The same woman whose door had been open, whose apartment was empty, who was now apparently forgotten. Theo backed away. The new tenant didn't seem to notice his unease. She waved.
See you around.
He didn't respond. Back in his apartment, he checked the security footage again. Replayed the knock. Replayed the voice. "Let me in." Then he noticed something new. In the corner of the static, just before the figure appeared.
A reflection.
Not in the door, but the window across from it. Someone was standing in the hall, yes, but someone else was standing behind him, inside the apartment. Facing him. Watching. Theo didn't scream. He didn't run. He just turned around. There was no one there. The room was silent. But the window.
The curtain was moving.
And for a second, in the reflection on the glass, he thought he saw a figure step just out of frame. And smile. The elevator that never stops. It was sometime after the second week that Theo noticed the elevator behaving strangely. At first, it was small things. The doors would open and close at odd intervals, even when no one pressed the button. It would arrive at his floor and linger with a low mechanical hum, as if waiting. Once, it went straight past him, skipping the third floor entirely, and when it came back down, the floor indicator blinked between 5 and for a full minute before settling again. But that morning, something new happened. Theo had slept badly, as usual. The knocking had stopped 3 nights ago, but silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. That morning, as he stepped out to check the mail, he saw the elevator was already on his floor. The doors were open. It was empty. He didn't remember anyone using it. Still holding his hoodie and wallet, he hesitated. Maybe it was just a glitch. Elevators sometimes moved on their own, right? But as he stood there, the overhead light inside flickered erratically. Then the panel beeped, and the doors started to close. On impulse, Theo stepped in. He figured he'd check the basement mailroom. It would save him the stairs. The moment the doors slid shut, the overhead lights went out for a split second, long enough to plunge him into a flash of darkness. Then the panel lit up again. And he noticed something wrong. None of the floor numbers were illuminated. Instead, the elevator started descending. Slow, heavy, creaking like it hadn't been oiled in decades.
CO pressed B for basement.
Nothing happened. He tried the 3 for his floor. Still nothing. Panic crept in as the elevator continued to descend, far past what should have been 1 floor.
4 seconds. 8 seconds.
12. And then, with a sharp metallic thud, the elevator stopped. The doors didn't open immediately. Theo's breathing had gone shallow.
The silence inside was total. Oppressive, like standing in the belly of something alive.
He reached out and pushed the door open button. Nothing. The air felt colder.
Metallic.
Wrong. Then, at last, the doors slid open with a groan.
Pitch black. CO blinked into the darkness.
There were no hallway lights. No exit signs. Just black walls stretching in both directions. The concrete was bare, raw. The air had a damp, earthy smell, like a crawl space under a house.
And something else sound.
A faint rustling.
Noise pause.
Soft and layered, like a dozen mouths murmuring all at once just beyond the walls. Theo's entire body tensed. He leaned out slightly, trying to see more, but the darkness was so total it felt like a wall. He should have pressed the close button. He should have stayed inside. But something about the whispering held him in place. Then, behind him, the elevator doors began to close. Theo spun around and dove, catching them just in time to squeeze back inside. The doors shut with a shudder. The panel blinked. And this time, instead of floor numbers, the screen simply showed. Theo gripped the railing, heart pounding. The elevator began to rise again, slower than before.
세컨즈 드래그드.
And then, with a small ding, it opened back on the third floor, his floor. The lights here were normal. The hallway was quiet, faintly buzzing.
시오 스텀벨드 아웃. 핸즈 클레미.
He looked behind him just as the doors closed. The elevator went up again. He didn't press anything. Back in his apartment, Theo sat at the table, trying to process what happened. He pulled out a notebook and started to jot things down, dates, odd events, everything. He'd never been the journaling type, but something about this building demanded documentation. It felt like it was erasing him. The notebook would anchor him. Under today's date, he wrote, "Elevator open to hallway that doesn't exist.
토텔 블랙아웃.
Whispering voices. No light. Floor panel glitched. Not basement." He paused, then added, "Don't use elevator again unless absolutely necessary." That evening, Theo forced himself to eat a full meal, shower, and turn off all his screens by 10 p.m. He needed rest. Needed to feel human again. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting backward from 100, trying to push away the sensation that something was watching him from inside the walls. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and full of whispers. He woke up the next morning to knocking again. But this time, it wasn't at 3:11 a.m. It was 9:24. And it was frantic. Bum 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 bum. Theo bolted upright, ran to the door, and looked through the peephole.
에이만 스토드 아웃사이드.
Young, disheveled, pale. He was breathing hard, knocking repeatedly with one hand while clutching something to his chest with the other. Theo cracked the door. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes widened.
라이브 히어.
Theo Hestita.
"Yes. I need to talk to someone."
서먼 후즈시니트.
Theo opened the door wider. The man stepped in and immediately dropped to the floor, shaking. He held out what he'd been clutching, a worn Polaroid. It showed a hallway identical to the one Theo saw in the elevator. Black. Endless. In the center of the image was something faint, blurred. A figure? A shape. "I went to check my laundry," the man whispered. "And the elevator, I ended up on a floor that isn't on the panel. It just opened. And it was black. Dead quiet. I thought it was just the basement with the lights off. So I stepped out." Theo didn't speak. The man continued. "Then I heard them.
위스퍼링.
And I saw," he broke off, eyes wide. "I ran back. Doors nearly closed on me." Theo slowly nodded. "I've seen it too," he said. They sat in the kitchen, drinking instant coffee and whispering like they were in a confessional booth. The man's name was Jordan. He lived in 2D. Moved in 3 months ago. He thought he was the only one who noticed strange things. "I asked the landlord about the elevator," he said.
랩테이노트 언더 더 비원 도어.
"What happened?" Next morning, the note was gone. And someone had slid this under my door. He tapped the Polaroid.
시오 린드 포워드.
"You ever try the 5th floor?" Jordan shook his head. "Doesn't exist. At least, not when I press the button." They agreed to avoid the elevator entirely,
take stairs only.
and if one of them disappeared, leave notes. Notes were proof. Notes were memory. A few days passed without incident. Until one evening, when Theo came home from class and found a new note slid under his door. Went to find out where the elevator really goes.
If I'm not back by 오전 3시, don't come looking.
G. Theo stared at it in disbelief. He checked the hallway. Empty. He ran down to 2D. Knocked. No answer. Heart thudding, he checked the stairwell, then the basement. Nothing. When he returned to the 3rd floor, the elevator doors were open again. It was waiting for him. Theo didn't sleep that night. He sat cross-legged on the floor with every light on, the Polaroid in his hand. He didn't know what terrified him more, that Jordan went in after promising not to, or that the building let him. At 3:11 a.m., the lights in the kitchen flickered. Theo grabbed his notebook and wrote,
조어던즈간.
Elevator opened again.
Same whispering.
Then he taped the note to the back of the apartment door. The next morning, he heard voices outside. For the first time in weeks, there were people in the hallway. He cracked open the door and peeked out. 2 men were standing near the elevator, holding a dolly and a set of boxes. Movers. A woman was talking to them mid-30s, well-dressed, holding a lease. She smiled.
F, I'll be on 2D.
Seems like a quiet building.
CO blinked.
He stepped out. Excuse me, he asked her. You said 2D? The woman nodded. Theo opened his mouth, then closed it. He walked back into his apartment, shut the door quietly, and pulled the tape off his note. He flipped to a new page and wrote in capital letters, It doesn't just take people. It replaces the memory of them. Then he stared at the elevator on the panel in his mind. The one that never stops. The one that opens to places that don't exist. The missing tenant's log. Theo couldn't stop thinking about the woman in 3C. One day, she was warning him in hushed tones through a cracked door. The next, gone, replaced by a stranger who claimed the unit had been empty for years. But Theo remembered her face. Pale. Tight-lipped.
Haunted.
He remembered the words. Leave before it chooses you. No one else seemed to. No one else ever remembered anyone who disappeared in this building. And now he feared he might be next. Theo spent the next 2 days scouring every inch of his apartment. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly. Proof? A way out? A clue? The walls remained solid. No hollow-sounding spots. No trapdoors. But the building had ways of hiding what it didn't want found. It was only on a particularly restless night, while taking out trash at 2 a.m., that he noticed the laundry room door slightly ajar. He hadn't used the laundry room yet. Every time he passed it, the flickering light overhead made him think twice. But something about the silence tonight felt different, like the building had exhaled and fallen asleep. Theo pushed the door open slowly. The room was larger than expected. Industrial washers and dryers lined the walls, some rusting, others blinking error messages. One machine in the far corner still tumbled clothes no one had claimed. The air smelled like mildew and metal. As he stepped inside, something crunched beneath his shoe. He looked down and saw a thick layer of dust and grit across the floor undisturbed, except for one clear trail leading from the door to the far wall. Theo followed it. There, nestled between 2 dead vending machines, was an old wooden cabinet. Its drawer was slightly open. Inside was a book. A ledger. Theo pulled it out. The leather cover was cracked and dry, coated in dust. No title. No markings. Just the weight of age and secrets. He brought it to the nearest folding table and opened it. The first page was handwritten, ink faded but legible. Tenant log the Merrow apartments. Theo flipped the page. A list of names. First names. Last names. Dates. Annabelle 3C moved in, March 2001. Thomas H. 2A moved in, June 2001. S. Kim B2 moved in, July 2001. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. But that wasn't what made his stomach drop. Every single name was crossed out. Sometimes with a single line. Sometimes with deep gouges, like someone had stabbed through the paper with a pen. Others had strange notations next to them. No retrieval. Memory faded. Merged.
엘리베이터 5.
Unrecorded exit. Theo's fingers trembled as he flipped further. He recognized some names. Jordan M2D. Crossed out. Another entry, Marie 3C moved in, unknown status. Advised departure erased.
머리.
That had to be the pale woman. The one who warned him. Erased.
라이크 시드 네버 이그지스티드.
Theo flipped to the last page. There were fewer names now. The second to last entry chilled him. Jordan Mallory 2D moved in, April 2025 crossed. June 2025 lost. Lost. The final entry wasn't even written in the same pen. It was recent. Fresh. Theo L. 3A moved in, June 2025 crossed. There was a faint start of a line through his name. But it wasn't completed. Theo stared at it. He hadn't even been here a month. And someone or something had already started crossing him out. A sharp clanging sound made him jump. He snapped the book shut and ducked behind a dryer, heart pounding. From the corner of the room, the machine that had been tumbling earlier abruptly stopped. The silence afterward was deeper than it should have been. Then the lights overhead flickered once, twice, and went out. Theo held his breath. The air shifted. Something moved behind the machines. He didn't wait. Clutching the ledger to his chest, he ran for the door, yanking it open and stumbling into the hallway. The lights out here were still on dim and yellow, but steady. He didn't stop until he was back inside his apartment with the door locked and bolted. The chair went under the knob. Every light in the unit turned on. He laid the ledger flat on the table and opened to his page again. Still there. Still unfinished. He stared at the page until his eyes burned. Then he flipped the cover shut, and noticed something strange. Inside the back cover, someone had written a message in faint pencil. It read, "They can't cross you out if you leave proof." And below that, "They feed on forgetting. If people remember you, they can't take you."
시오 블링트.
That was it. That was the key. Memory. The apartmenter, whatever lived in it, wasn't just taking people. It was erasing them. Removing all evidence. Mail, records, online footprints, even others' memories. But if something was left behind, a photo, a video, a note, then maybe, just maybe, it couldn't take the person fully. That's why Jordan left the note. That's why Marie whispered to him. That's why this ledger still existed. Because someone wanted him to find it. The next morning, Theo made copies of several pages of the ledger, particularly the ones with his name, Marie's, and Jordan's. He walked to a public library 3 blocks away, using a burner email to print them. When he came back, the building looked different. Not visibly, but the air felt colder. The lights in the lobby flickered more aggressively. The elevator dinged and opened without being summoned. Theo didn't ride it. He ran up the stairs 2 at a time. When he reached the 3rd floor, the hallway was silent. All the doors were closed. But his own door stood slightly ajar. His blood ran cold. He knew he had locked it. Chair. Deadbolt. Everything. He slowly pushed it open. His apartment was dark. The lights, which had been on when he left, were now off.
버레저간.
The table was bare. Theo's knees nearly buckled. But then he spotted something. A small, rectangular shape on the couch. He approached carefully. It was a Polaroid. A new one. It showed his apartment, his couch, in fact exactly as it was now. But sitting on the couch in the photo was him. Sleeping. Vulnerable.
마우스 슬라일리 오픈.
A shadow behind him. Written on the back. We remember you. His hands shook as he stuffed the photo into his pocket and backed out of the room. He didn't sleep in the apartment that night. Over the next few days, Theo began to document everything. He kept a flash drive of audio recordings, screenshots of corrupted camera footage, even the audio file of the whisper, "Let me in." He mailed duplicates to his sister, to friends from school, even uploaded some to anonymous forums. He needed others to know he existed. That this place existed. If anyone remembered him, it might protect him. But the building seemed to catch on.
더 호레이즈 그루 콰이어터.
No more footsteps from above. No more whirring from other rooms. No more tenants seen. Even when he knocked on every door, no one answered. It was like he was the only one left. Except for whoever or whatever had written the ledger. On a particularly stormy evening, the building went dark. Power outage. Theo lit a candle and sat near the door with a baseball bat in one hand and his phone in the other.
더 다운미스 프레스트 어겐스트 더 인도우즈 라이 게이에이브.
Thena knock. Not on his door. On the wall behind him.
쓰리낙스.
Slow. Solid.
딜리버리트.
He turned. Candlelight flickering. The knocks came again, but this time from a different wall. Then from the ceiling. Then from beneath the floor. Theo grabbed a marker and scrawled on his forearm. My name is Theo.
I live in 3A.
If you find this, remember me. Then he pressed record on his phone. He spoke directly to the camera. My name is Theo. I live at 1836 Renfield, apartment 3A. If you're watching this, I don't know if I'm still here.
I don't know if I exist anymore.
But I was real. This place is taking people, erasing them. There was a ledger in the laundry room. It's probably gone now. Please don't forget me. The phone died 2 minutes later. Theo woke up the next morning to birdsong.
설라이 스루 더 인도.
His clock read 8:12 a.m. No static. No knocks. No shadow behind him. He blinked. Had it stopped? He stepped outside into the hallway. The door across from him was open. Boxes. Movers.
A woman chatting on the phone.
Yeah, 3A was finally cleared, she said into the phone. Guess the last tenant never moved in.
Theo stood frozen.
The woman didn't see him. The movers didn't see him. He turned back to his apartment door. It was gone.
Just a 블랙홀.
As if 3A had never existed. Apartment 7B is always empty. For 2 nights after Theo's apartment vanished, he slept in the building's stairwell. Not because he wanted Tobit, because it was the only place left where the walls didn't whisper. Or at least, not yet. He should have left, packed whatever was left of himself and run. But run where? When no one remembered you existed, when your name wasn't in any database, When your face didn't even reflect properly in mirrors, where could you go? So he stayed. The Merrow hadn't finished with him yet. On the third night, he climbed up toward the top floors, quiet, cautious, moving by instinct more than reason. He wasn't sure what drew him upward. Curiosity.
desperation.
Maybe both. The hallway on the 7th floor was darker than the others. Narrower, too. 7 apartments lined the corridor, each labeled with peeling brass numbers. 7A, 7B, 7C. He paused outside apartment 7B. The door was heavy, dark green, slightly warped by time or moisture. There were 4 deep scratch marks near the knob. Old. Faded. As though someone or something had tried to claw its way out. No light spilled from the bottom of the door. No smell. No sound. At least, not yet. Theo turned to leave, but then it came.
더 드래깅 사운드.
Low. Slow. Something heavy scraping across a floor. Like furniture. Or a body. Followed by soft, wet sobbing. He froze. It was coming from behind 7B's door. Plain as day. No doubt. He glanced down the hallway, half expecting someone else to appear. But the corridor remained empty. Silent, save for that terrible sound.
시오 린드 클로서.
The sobbing rose into a muffled whimper, then dropped into silence again. He backed away slowly, careful not to breathe too loud. Then, as he turned the corner toward the stairwell, the door creaked open. Just an inch. Nothing inside. Just blackness beyond. He waited. No movement.
노 포트스테프스.
Theo took a step forward. Then another. He placed one trembling hand against the door and pushed it slightly wider, revealing the darkness inside. He didn't enter. Not yet. But from within, he heard a voice. Small. Ragged. Female. Please. Help me.
더 보이스 크랙트 라이크 이트 헤던트 스포컨인 이어즈.
Theo's stomach dropped. He should walk away. He knew that. This was how the apartment got people. But the voice. It didn't sound like the others. Not like the whispers or the static.
나 라이크 더 브레스 비하인드 올즈.
It sounded human. So he stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. The air was thick wet, like breathing through wool. The apartment was pitch black, the kind of darkness that consumed everything. Theo reached for his phone and turned on the flashlight. Dust floated in the beam, thick as snow. He stood in a narrow entryway. The walls were covered in yellowed floral wallpaper, peeling at the corners. Old photos in cracked frames hung at crooked angles. Each picture had the faces scratched out with what looked like nails. Theo's heart pounded. He stepped further inside. The dragging sound began again, closer this time. His light swept across a living room, barren except for a single rocking chair facing the window. It rocked gently, slowly, but no one was sitting in it. The sobbing started again.
디스 타임 라우더.
To his left. Theo turned the light and found a bedroom door cracked open. Please. Help.
더 보이스 어겐.
He pushed the door open. Inside was a child's room. Tiny bed. Torn pink wallpaper. Old, mold-stained toys scattered across the floor.
인더 파워 코어너 세트 에이걸.
Or what looked like a girl. Face buried in her knees. Shoulders shaking.
헤이. she whispered.
Are you okay? She didn't respond. He stepped closer. And the room changed.
서덜리. 더 플로어 세그드.
The ceiling seemed taller.
더 세도즈 디퍼.
And the girl. She began to hum.
에이 소프트. 툴러스 사운드.
Then she lifted her head. Her face was blurred, like someone had smeared it across a canvas. No eyes. No nose. Just a faint impression of what should be features. She opened her mouth wide, wider than humanly possible. A single word escaped, deep and guttural. Stay.
Theo Stumbel bắt quát. Phlasai bim saking Willy.
The girl stood jerky, unnatural, and took one step toward him. Then another. The walls started breathing. The wallpaper curled inward like it was alive, reaching for him. Theo ran. He sprinted through the hallway, tripping over a broken chair, crashing through the darkness. Behind him, the voice grew louder. No longer human. Not crying. Screaming. Stay. 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 He burst into the hallway, slammed the door shut behind him, and leaned against it. Silence returned like a switch had flipped.
나 내이 신결 사운드.
He waited for minutes before finally backing away. The brass number on the door read 7B. But as he looked again, it faded. The brass tarnished before his eyes.
And the number peeled away from the door like old skin until the wood stood blank.
As if apartment 7B had never existed. That night, Theo wrote another note. He scribbled furiously on a page from his notebook, slid it under every apartment door on floors 6 and 7. If you hear sobbing from apartment 7B, do not open the door.
Do not speak to the jail.
The apartment is not empty. She will ask you to help her. Don't believe it.
It isn't a girl.
It isn't human.
Please remember this.
Tape this to your fridge, your door, anywhere.
She can't take you if you remember.
He signed it. TL 3rd floor. The next morning, most of the notes were gone. Except one, stuck to the hallway bulletin board by a single rusted pushpin. Someone had written beneath his warning, "There is no apartment 7B." But that wasn't true. Theo had been inside, seen it, heard her. He knew what he saw. So when he searched the city tax records the next day, using the library computer again, he looked for the building's blueprint. The Merrow had 7 floors. Yes, but only 6 registered apartments per floor. There was no record of 7B. And yet, there was a note in the archives from 1972. Complaint from resident in 7A Re. Noise next door.
Constant dragging and weeping sounds.
Requested Unit 7B be sealed. Record closed. August 1974. Disappearance unresolved. Theo's heart dropped. The last registered tenant?
일리스마어로 에이지 구 스테터스. 로스트.
No explanation.
No photo. Just the word, lost. And a scribbled note in red pen beside her name. Do not respond to knocks. Do not speak. She's learning faces now. Theo stared at the screen.
페이시즈.
Like the ones scratched out in the photos. His hand moved to his pocket. The Polaroid he found earlier, the one showing him asleep on his couch. He pulled it out. And saw something new. His face had been scratched out. That night, he sealed his apartment door shut with duct tape, pushed furniture against it, and wrote on the walls in marker. My name is Theo.
I do not live in 7B.
I do not speak to the girl.
I do not open the door.
He didn't sleep, but he heard her, sobbing.
All night.
Just outside. The locked mailboxes. The mailboxes in the lobby of the Merrow had always seemed like an afterthought, tarnished brass slots mounted to a rotting wooden panel, many without functioning locks. They sat in a cramped alcove beside the stairwell, beneath a dead fluorescent bulb that buzzed faintly, day and night. Theo had walked past them 100 times without much thought. But tonight, something compelled him to stop. Maybe it was the fact that his apartment no longer existed, or that he'd watched 7B vanish from the doorplate like melting wax. Maybe it was the sobbing from the walls, or the Polaroid in his pocket, now showing his own face scratched out. But mostly, it was the envelope. It hadn't been there the day before.
A 신계, 프리스틴 화이트 엔벌로프 스터케페 아웃 오브 메일박스 3A.
His mailbox. Except he hadn't had mail in weeks. There were no bills.
No flyers.
Not even junk mail. And technically, as of 2 days ago, his unit didn't exist. Theo looked around the lobby.
Empty. As always.
He tugged at the mailbox door. As expected, it was stuck jammed shut like it always had been. He crouched down, pulled out his pocket knife, and carefully wedged it under the latch. After some prying, the lock gave with a brittle metallic snap, and the door creaked open. The white envelope fluttered out and landed at his feet. But it wasn't the only one inside. The box was stuffed, nearly overflowing with envelopes of every shape and age. Some were yellowed and curled at the edges, others still sealed and crisp. All addressed to apartment 3, but not to Theo. He reached in and pulled out a fistful. To Jason R. Apt 3A.
To 니너 러클레어 3A.
To D. Patel 3A urgent. Return to sender recipient not found. Letter after letter. Name after name. He flipped through them rapidly. Dozens. Dozens of people, all listed as residents of 3A. Some postmarked as far back as 2010. And every one of them had vanished. Theo sat on the cold tile floor, sorting the envelopes into a pile. In one, a birthday card with a handwritten message, Happy 34th, Jason.
유스티로 미디너.
Love, Mom. Another contained an eviction notice for Deborah W., dated 2014. A third was a frantic handwritten letter from someone named Sean, written in shaky block print. Nina, please come home. I know what you said about the walls. I didn't believe you, but now I hear them too. Please. Just leave that place. Just leave. I don't care if we're done. Just don't disappear like them. Theo froze. He dug deeper into the pile. Some envelopes were never opened. Others had return addresses with no city, just names like Catherine or Unit 2E, written in smeared ink. One had no writing at all, just a single Polaroid inside.
A man's hand pressed against a window.
A faint reflection of his face, mouth open in a scream. The image was distorted, blurred. The kind of blur the building seemed to create on purpose. Theo shoved the mail back into the box, except for a few letters and the photograph, which he tucked into his backpack. Then he noticed something else. A faint line of scratches at the bottom of the mailbox. Barely visible. Like someone had etched letters into the metal from the inside. He leaned in with his flashlight. There were 5 words. If they forget, you vanish. Theo returned to the stairwell. He didn't go back to his floor, not yet. He wasn't ready to face the empty door where 3A used to be. Instead, he headed down. He hadn't explored much of the basement beyond the laundry room. Tonight, that changed. He took each step slowly, candlelight flickering in the stairwell window behind him.
더에어 그루댐프. Heavy.
The kind of weight you felt more in your lungs than on your skin. When he reached the bottom, he found another hallway, one that wasn't on the blueprint. Cement walls. Flickering bulbs mounted crookedly into the ceiling. And along the corridor, a second set of mailboxes. Old. Wooden.
Almost antique.
Each one had a brass tag, B1, B2, B3, and so on. Most had no locks. Some were nailed shut. One, labeled B4, had chains wrapped around it, bolted with a rusted padlock. And one, labeled B0, had no slot.
No keyhole.
Just a door sealed entirely with wax and string.
Theo áp project ca phèo.
A whisper of breath passed through the corridor. Something moved behind one of the boxes. Then stopped. He stepped back, heart racing. He didn't open any of them. Not yet. But he reached into his backpack and slid the Polaroid of the screaming man into mailbox B1. He needed someone else to find it. Someone who might still live here.
Someone who could remember.
Back in his room, if it could still be called that, Theo taped the photo of the mailbox scratches to the wall. Then he started a new log. On an old spiral notebook, he wrote, Missing tenants. Unit 3A.
Jason R. 2010.
Nina Leclerc 2012. DBRW 2014 rok.
D. Patel unknown. COL 2025. In progress.
He underlined, in progress. He wrote next to each name, no known record of departure. No neighbors remember. On the next page, he started a list titled, Rules to Stay Remembered. Keep copies of your name, face, and unit.
Record your voice daily.
Leave notes in shared spaces. Avoid the elevator. Do not speak to the girl in 7B.
Mark your door every night.
Trust no hallway that wasn't there yesterday. If your name is scratched out, run. He taped that page to the fridge. By the next morning, it had curled up at the corners. And the ink had faded, but only from Rule 1. Later that day, Theo left another round of notes around the building. This time, he wrote them in red Sharpie. Thick.
Impossible to ignore.
He posted one beside the mailboxes. If your name disappears from your mailbox, they've started on you. Do not stay silent. Remember others. Speak their names. The Merrow feeds on forgotten things. That evening, when he came back from the stairwell, the note was gone. In its place, taped to the wall in the same spot, was a new note. Written in shaky handwriting. B0 opens if no one remembers. No signature. No explanation. That night, Theo had another dream. He was back in the mailbox hallway, but it was endless. Mailboxes stretched out in all directions. He opened one labeled, Theo L. Inside was a photograph of him asleep at his desk. Standing over him in the picture, barely visible in the grain, was the girl from 7B. Her eyes were stitched shut with black thread. He woke up gasping. His cheek was wet. A letter sat on his lap. Unmarked. Sealed. He opened it. Inside, a single sentence, printed in sharp, clean typewriter ink. You are being remembered too much. Theo didn't sleep for 3 days after that. He copied the tenant log, posted it on Reddit,
Uploaded images.
shared anonymous blog entries, even started a podcast episode called The Apartment That Erases You. It only got 3 listens. 1 comment. This story sounds like what happened to my uncle in Toronto. Apartment vanished. Nobody believed us. Tell me more. U/Void Collector 77. Theo messaged them immediately, but the user never replied. The account was deleted 12 hours later, and his post flagged for removal. Reason: no verifiable evidence.
Urban legend.
On the morning of the 4th day, Theo checked the lobby again. He approached the mailboxes. Mailbox 3A was sealed shut. this time welded.
A 신계, fresh engraving in the breastplate.
No unit assigned. Theo stared at it, breath caught in his throat. He turned around and saw a woman entering the building with 2 suitcases and a small dog. She smiled politely. Just signed for 3A, she said cheerfully. Hope it's not too noisy here. Theo opened his mouth, closed it, then slowly nodded. He went back to his room, which now had no number on the door. He wrote a new message in black marker on the inside of the wall. If you find this, I'm Theo. I lived in 3A. I existed.
Don't forget me.
He sat on the floor, surrounded by letters written to ghosts, and waited. The neighbor who warned me. The first time Theo saw the old woman in 3C, she was staring at her door from the hallway, whispering something too soft to hear. Her hands trembled around the key she was too afraid to use. He approached slowly, groceries in his arms, pausing a few steps from her. "Everything okay?" he asked. She turned sharply, like a deer catching the scent of fire. Her eyes were a pale gray, nearly colorless, and she looked past Theo's shoulder before finally answering. "It hasn't picked you yet," she said. He blinked. "What?" She glanced toward his apartment, what had been 3A, before the number disappeared. "It waits," she whispered, backing into her apartment. "But when it chooses you, you'll know." The door clicked shut before he could say another word. Theo stood frozen, groceries now heavy in his arms, heart hammering. That was 4 nights ago. Now, 3C is empty. Completely abandoned. No furniture. No curtains. No signs anyone ever lived there. Theo only noticed because the door was wide open again, just like the day after she warned him. He peeked inside expecting to find the old woman, maybe collapsed or packed up in a hurry. But there was nothing. Not even dust. The floor gleamed as though it had just been installed. The windows had fresh caulking. No smell of mothballs. No creaky floorboards. Like the room had been reset. Scrubbed. Erased. Theo stepped inside. It felt wrong. Like stepping into a hotel room that pretended to be a home. Then he noticed something carved into the doorframe, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. She remembered.
3 words.
Gouged in with something sharp. His breath caught in his throat. That was the only trace she'd been there at all. And even that might vanish soon. Back in what remained of his own apartment, the number now completely gone, the mailbox sealed, Theo added the woman's name to his ledger. Or rather, what he remembered of her. He didn't know her full name, just the initial. Mrs. E. 3C warned me. Disappeared. Unit reset. He stared at the note for a long time, then underlined, warned me, 3 times. She was the only one who had ever said anything directly. Not whispered from behind walls. Not in dreams or static. To his face. And now she was gone. It confirmed a terrifying idea Theo had been avoiding for weeks. The Merrow notices when you try to help someone. It doesn't like to be exposed. And if you speak up, it silences you. That night, the knocking returned. Not at the door. From inside the walls. Soft. Rhythmic. Not demanding. Not violent, just persistent. Like it was reminding him, I'm still here. He stayed up writing. Filled every inch of notebook paper with names, apartment numbers, messages to himself. He taped them to the fridge, the walls, the floor. He even wrote on the mirror in soap.
알쇼.
You live. You exist. You remember. He tried sleeping in the bathtub, thinking it might be harder for the building to reach him there. But at 3:11 a.m., the pipes began to groan. Not from water pressure but from whispers.
Was hissed from the drain.
He pressed his ear closer, despite every part of him begging not to. A single voice echoed up. She remembered too much. He bolted from the tub, knocking over the curtain rod. He didn't return to the bathroom that night. The next morning, Theo did something reckless. He went back to 3C, not just to see if it had changed but to search. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Clues.
hidden letters.
Anything the building might have missed when it wiped the room. He checked under the sink. Nothing. Behind the fridge. Clean. He moved into the bedroom, scanning every inch of wall, floor, and ceiling. Then, under the closet shelf, he found a loose panel. It popped off easily, revealing a small notebook wrapped in cloth. He pulled it out carefully, hands shaking. Inside were pages written in tight, looping script. Not a tenant log. Not a diary.
Instructions.
Dozens of them. If the girl knocks, don't respond. The man in the elevator only appears when someone is about to disappear. Never accept gifts left at your door. They are not from the neighbors. If the walls bleed, that means someone has remembered too late. Once your name vanishes from the mailroom, you are no longer safe above ground. Each entry dated. The last one was circled in red ink.
If I vanish, remember this. It chose 3 next. The boy doesn't know it.
He will soon. Help him if you can, but not directly.
Not out loud.
It listens. It listens. It listens. Theo sat down hard on the closet floor. His hands trembled so violently the notebook slipped. She'd known. She'd tried. She'd left this for him. And the building hadn't found it yet. That night, Theo kept the notebook under his pillow. He didn't sleep. Just watched the hallway through the peephole, waiting for anything to move. At 2:49 a.m., someone knocked on his wall again. This time, it was 4 knocks.
Different rhythm.
More urgent. He leaned close to the wall, heart pounding. And faintly, barely audible, he heard her voice. The old woman. Leave before it chooses you. Theo stared at the wall long after the voice faded. She was gone. Erased. But somehow, her voice lingered. Maybe because of the notebook. Maybe because he remembered. Maybe because her last act of rebellion writing, carving, recording was enough to leave a splinter in the Merrow's mind. He added a new page to his ledger.
Manifestations of resistance.
Mrs. E. Left notebook behind. Voice heard after disappearance. Apartment reset, but not scrubbed completely. Carving on doorframe.
Last warning recorded. He circled it in red pen.
Memories fight back. The next day, Theo taped pages from the notebook to the back of hallway picture frames. He slipped one behind the fire escape map, another under the stairwell railing, a third inside the janitor's closet near the basement. If the building tried to erase him next, someone might still find one.
I still remember.
But when he returned to his floor, he stopped cold. There, standing in front of his door, was a man in a gray maintenance uniform. His face was wrong.
Not blurry like Toggle in 7B.
Just unfinished. Like a face halfway through being erased by time. He was taping something to Theo's door.
CO duct behind the corner. Heart hammering. And waited.
When he peeked back, the man was gone.
No footsteps.
No elevator sounds.
Nothing. Theo approached his door. The note said, "Your unit is being decommissioned. Please prepare to relocate." Below that, stamped in red,
아큐펀트 스테터스, 언베러파잇.
Theo tore the note down and burned it in his sink. Ash floated toward the ceiling in thin gray curls. They were coming for him now. He was next. That night, he dreamed of 3C again. But this time, it was empty. A hallway stretched from the closet, expanding endlessly into darkness. At the far end, a figure stood. It was the woman, Mrs. E. Her eyes were sewn shut with black thread. But her mouth moved. "It doesn't want your body. It wants your memory. If no one remembers you, it becomes your name. It wears you."
시오 졸티드 어에이.
His pillow was damp. The notebook gone. He looked everywhere. Every drawer. Every corner. Nothing. He even checked 3C again. The panel was sealed.
더 클라지트 셀프 프레시리 페인티드.
As if none of it had ever existed. But when he returned to his apartment, one thing had changed. His mirror. Written across it, in red marker.
이 remember her.
Do you? Theo took a photo of the mirror, then of himself. He printed them at the library, taped one to the hallway wall, slid one behind a bathroom tile, left a third in the mailbox downstairs. Then he wrote the old woman's name, her warning, and the date in 10 different notebooks. If the building wanted him gone, he would fight to be remembered.
Rent paid in silence.
The landlord never appears in person. Rent must be slipped under a door marked B1, which leads to a bricked-off wall. Theo didn't even realize rent was due until a thin white envelope slid under his door one morning. No knock.
No footsteps.
Just the paper slicing quietly across the floor like a warning. He stared at it for a full minute before picking it up. Merrow Property MGMT was stamped in red ink on the front, but the font looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. There was no logo, no phone number. Inside, a short typed letter.
Dear Resident.
Monthly payment due, July 1st. Amount, $830. Please deposit cash only under door B1 in basement. Do not attempt to speak to management. Receipts are not provided. Failure to comply may result in termination of residency. Thank you for choosing the Merrow.
시오리드 it twice.
3 times. He hadn't signed a lease. He hadn't even met a landlord. The day he moved in, the key had been taped to the mailbox with a sticky note that read, "Welcome, 3A." And now they wanted cash. Under a door that led nowhere? That night, he went back to the basement. This time with purpose. He hadn't fully explored the B1 door since that first day. He remembered the hallway, the dust, the silence, the oppressive air, but not the door itself. Now, he saw it clearly. It was steel, painted the same olive green as the others, but the number B1 had been etched in by hand rough, uneven, as if someone had scratched it with a knife.
에이식 메일 슬라트 세트로 온 더 도어.
Bolted.
슬라일리 러스티드. 시오넬트. 비하인드 더 슬라트. 히 허드 너싱.
No humming.
No whispering.
Not even the faint buzz of a light bulb. He pressed his ear against the door. Silence. Complete, total silence. But it wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that screamed. He didn't submit payment that night. Instead, he returned upstairs and added a new entry to the notebook he'd started copying from Mrs. E's journal. July 3rd rent letter arrived. First request since moving in. Instructions demand cash delivered to B1.
노논 랜드로워드.
Door leads to sealed brick wall. Will test what happens if unpaid. He waited. Nothing happened that night. But the next morning, when he opened the refrigerator, the milk had spoiled. All of it. He hadn't even bought milk. Then the water turned brown. By the evening, his ceiling light began flickering non-stop, humming like an angry wasp. That night, he barely slept. And at exactly 3:33 a.m., his closet door opened by itself. No wind. No draft. Just a slow creak. When he checked, it was empty. But scratched into the inside panel, fresh and jagged, were 5 words. Pay what you owe. The next day, he pulled out $830 in wrinkled bills and returned to B1. The hallway was colder this time. Dust blew across the cement floor, despite no visible vents. As he approached the door, the overhead bulb dimmed then steadied, almost like it recognized him. He reached out and slowly lifted the mail slot. Beyond it was blackness. Not a room. Not a hallway. Just a void. He pushed the money in. It vanished instantly, like water down a drain. He lowered the slot, heart pounding, then turned and left. That night, everything in the apartment reset. Water ran clean again. The lights steadied. The humming stopped. Even the milk was back in the fridge fresh, labeled with his name. Theo stared at it for a long time before closing the door. The building had accepted the payment. It wasn't just haunted. It was operational. On July 5th, another envelope arrived. This time, it was thinner. Inside, a typed note.
Dear Resident.
Your account is in good standing. We appreciate your silence. Keep paying, and you'll keep existing. Do not miss next payment. Do not ask questions.
MERROWMGMT.
Theo burned the letter immediately. Then he ran back to the basement and examined the wall behind B1. Still bricked. Still solid. But he noticed something new. A thin line of fingerprints across the brick, small, oily smudges. As if someone inside had been pressing on them from the other side. He started asking around. Cautiously. The neighbor in 2F Alma, a nurse with tired eyes, was the only one who didn't look at him like he was crazy. When he asked if she'd ever met the landlord, she shook her head slowly. No one's seen him. Ever, she said, brushing hair behind her ear. Rent just happens.
You pay. Things stay quiet.
You don't. She didn't finish the sentence. Theo leaned in. Do you know what's behind B1? Alma's lips tightened. Then she whispered, just don't ever knock. She closed her door. That was the last time he saw her. 2 days later, her apartment was empty.
Another resident gone.
Another unit scrubbed. On July 10th, the building trembled. It started at 2:08 a.m. A low groan, like stone grinding on stone. Theo woke up gasping, certain something was inside his walls. He stood in the living room, watching the ceiling. Cracks formed thin at first, then widening. From behind them, a voice hissed out. Rent is more than money. He backed away slowly.
A photo fell from the wall.
It was one he hadn't, a keen black and white image of him standing at the B1 door, holding the cash envelope. His face was distorted, like the building had taken its own record. He turned it over. In red ink. You are a tenant now.
You belong to us.
The next morning, Theo found something wedged under his door.
Not a letter this time.
A key. Heavy.
Old.
Iron. Attached to a tag that read, For B1 only if door opens itself. He placed it on the table and stared at it for hours. He didn't dare try it. But the building had plans. That night, at exactly midnight, B1 creaked open. On its own. He didn't see it. But his camera did. He'd left an old camcorder in the hallway. When he reviewed the footage the next day, he saw the door unlatch, swing inward revealing nothing but a corridor lined with red carpeting. And movement.
서머너 something stepped just barely into frame.
Not enough to see clearly, but enough to make the screen glitch. Theo paused the frame. In the still, he noticed the faint outline of another door.
One deeper inside. And scrolled on it. In dripping in. Management.
Theo still hasn't opened that door. Not yet. But he made a new rule in his notebook.
Pay on time.
Always. But never pay with questions. Because here at the Merrow, rent wasn't just money. It was obedience. Silence. And the price of missing a payment wasn't eviction. It was erasure. The vanishing floor. Theo had always heard rumors about the Merrow's 5th floor, but no tenant ever spoke of it openly. Some said it was sealed off, others whispered it was cursed. The strangest rumor, however, was the one whispered only during storms, that the 5th floor only revealed itself when it rained. And not just any rain. It had to be a heavy downpour, the kind that slammed against the city windows and soaked the streets like a flood. Theo had been skeptical. The building was full of mysteries, yes, but this one seemed like a tale made to scare new tenants. Until that night. It had been raining for hours, the relentless sound of water hammering the windows like a chorus of warning drums. Theo was restless, pacing his apartment with the Polaroid of himself, his scratched-out face still tucked inside his backpack.
The evening's shadows crept across the walls and he heard the softest creak, a noise barely louder than the rain itself. It came from the fire escape.
Curiosity and something deeper, a force he couldn't quite name, pulled him toward the window. The old metal ladder outside glistened with rainwater, the drops running like tiny rivers down the rusted rails. He opened the window. Cold rain splashed onto his face. The fire escape groaned beneath his boots as he climbed down into the night. The 5th floor was not on any of the building's official blueprints. In fact, no elevator button corresponded to it, and none of the tenants had keys for that level. The stairwell doors were locked tight on every floor, and the elevator stopped only at the numbered levels except tonight. Tonight, something had changed. Theo reached the 5th floor landing. The rain hit the metal roof overhead with a steady roar, and puddles collected around the base of the fire escape stairs. A narrow corridor stretched out before him, lined with peeling wallpaper, cracked tile, and old light fixtures that flickered sporadically. The air smelled damp and cold, a mixture of wet stone and mildew. It was silent, save for the pounding rain and the distant rumble of thunder. There were no apartment numbers on the doors here. No mailboxes.
No signs of life.
Yet, as Theo stepped forward, a faint glow emanated from beneath the door at the end of the hall. He moved cautiously, heart thudding in his chest. The door was old wood, warped by years of moisture. Its paint peeled away in strips, revealing dark stains underneath. A rusty brass handle hung crooked. Theo reached out, the cold metal burning through his glove. When he touched the handle, a shiver ran down his spine though the building was breathing through that door.
The glow shifted, flickering like a candle's flame.
He took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside was a small room that looked like a forgotten office. An ancient desk sat under the window, its surface cluttered with papers yellowed with age. Dust motes floated in the weak light, disturbed only by Theo's entrance. But what caught his attention was the wall across from him, a massive corkboard covered with photographs, notes, and maps.
시오 스테프트 클로서, 하워트 파운딩.
The photos were of tenants. Faces he recognized. Faces that had disappeared. Next to each photo, scribbled notes detailed dates of move-in and move-out except for several, which were simply marked missing. He ran his fingers along the corkboard, reading the notes. Many were familiar names from the mailbox in the basement.
제이선 알, 니너 러클레어, 데버러 W.
The dates ranged from 2009 to as recent as last year. But then he saw his own photo pinned in the center. The face was scratched out. A red X marked across it. Below was a handwritten note in shaky ink. Targeted. To be erased.
시오즈 브레스코트, 서덜리, 더룸 그루 콜드.
The lights flickered violently, then died. The faint glow vanished. Total darkness enveloped him. He fumbled for his phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam landed on the corkboard. It had changed. New photos had appeared. He hadn't seen these before. There were pictures of empty doorways, scratched out faces in mirrors, and one photo of a girl.
더걸 프롬 7B.
Her face blurred and stitched shut. Beneath her picture, a note. She waits for the next.
House skin gravet.
A soft whisper echoed from the darkness.
Remember. He spun around. Nothing. Just the faint outline of furniture swallowed by shadows. Remember. The whisper repeated. Closer. Then it came from the corner. Theo's flashlight shone on a figure child, small and trembling.
더걸 from 7B.
Her mouth opened unnaturally wide. She whispered, voice like wind through dry leaves. Stay. Theo stumbled backward, heart pounding. The room seemed to stretch, walls bending inward. The corkboard's photos rippled like water. The girl took a step closer. Her face blurred and twisted into something terrible. Theo wanted to run, but his feet felt rooted. The whispers grew louder. Stay, stay, stay. Then a sudden noise, footsteps above.
A slam of a door.
Theo seized the moment. He darted for the exit. His hand slammed against the door handle. Locked. Panic rising, he pounded the door. Help. No response. The whispers swirled around him, growing into a deafening roar. The girl smiled. The door behind him creaked. A shadow moved inside the corridor outside. Theo's flashlight caught the silhouette of a man. The figure stepped forward. Not fully formed.
Flickering like a broken projection.
He held out a hand.
시오 hesitated.
The shadow's voice was low and gravelly. Follow me. Desperate, Theo reached for the hand. The shadow grasped his wrist. A cold surge ran through his arm. Suddenly, he was pulled forward, through the door, into the corridor. The door slammed shut behind him. The 5th floor began to dissolve.
Walls melting into mist.
The corridor stretched, endless.
The rain faded.
Theo found himself back on the fire escape, dripping wet. The storm had stopped. The building was silent. The 5th floor was gone. But in his hand, he clutched a small photo. A Polaroid of the corkboard. His own face, still scratched out. And beneath it, a new note.
Written in fresh red ink. You remember.
But next time you might not.
Theo Shiver.
The vanishing floor was real. And it had mocked him. Everyone forgets.
CO5가 필링 헤비어 된 유조에
The room smelled faintly of damp earth, and sunlight filtered through the grimy window like it was struggling to find him. He reached for his phone on the bedside table. No signal. Not one bar. He frowned. His phone always had at least 2 bars here, even with the thick concrete walls of the Merrow. He tried again. Still nothing. It was the beginning of the forgetting. At first, it was little things. When Theo called his best friend, Jonah, the call dropped immediately. When he texted, no replies came. At university, he went to the registrar's office to check his enrollment. His name was missing. Not just off the list. Gone entirely. His student ID number no longer linked to any records. He tried explaining, but no one remembered him. The girl at the front desk looked puzzled. There's no Theo L. registered here. His professors, his classmates all strangers. At home, the phone still refused to connect. His social media accounts were deleted. His email inaccessible. Even his bank account was flagged as inactive. He was slipping out of the world. Desperate, Theo reached out to family. But when he called his mother, she said, "Who is this?" When he visited his apartment after school, his roommate didn't recognize him. "It's been weeks since you moved out," the roommate said, shutting the door. Theo was alone. The Merrow had started erasing him. Not his body. Not yet. But his existence. He sat in the hallway, clutching the notebook he had copied from Mrs. E.'s journal. He flipped to the page titled, "Rules to Stay Remembered." He read aloud, "Keep copies of your name, face, and unit.
Record your voice daily.
Leave notes in shared spaces. Avoid the elevator. Do not speak to the girl in 7B.
Mark your door every night.
Trust no hallway that wasn't there yesterday. If your name is scratched out, run." Theo's name was already scratched out in the basement mailboxes. He was running out of time. He tried everything to prove he existed. He visited the post office to request mail forwarding. The clerk looked at him like he was a ghost. "No record of your forwarding address," she said. He tried to register for classes online. An error message. User not found. He tried to pay bills. His accounts didn't exist. Even his reflection started to fade. The first time he noticed it was when brushing his teeth. His face in the mirror looked dimmer, less solid. His hands flickered like static on a bad TV channel. That night, he heard whispers again. Not from the walls,
Not from the shadows.
but inside his head. Forget. Disappear. Vanished. He grabbed his journal and began to record his voice. "This is Theo. I exist. I am here. Remember me." The recorder stuttered. The playback was distorted. His voice echoed strangely. Days passed. His phone finally showed 1 bar. He dialed his mother's number again. She answered. "I'm sorry, who is this?" she asked. He told her everything, but she said it was impossible. "I haven't seen you in years." The next day, Theo found his name missing from the mailbox again. Even the mail addressed to him was gone. His apartment door had no number. The hallway lights flickered. And the girl in 7B appeared. She stood silently, watching him with her stitched shut eyes.
CO remembered the notebook instructions.
"Do not speak to the girl in 7B. He turned away, but her presence was overwhelming. He felt her eyes on him, burning through the dark. He wrote on his door.
I remember. Don't forget me.
When he woke up, the words had vanished. His body still moved, but his memories felt thinner. He tried to write down his life story, his parents' names, his favorite song, but the words slipped through his fingers. One morning, he opened his notebook to find pages blank, empty, his handwriting gone, as if someone had erased them. He looked outside. The world kept moving, but he was fading.
Like a shadow cast by a dying light.
Desperation drove him to the basement again. He hoped to find a way out. Instead, he found the locked mailbox B0. He remembered the note. B0 opens if no one remembers. He pressed his ear to the door. Faint voices echoed inside, whispers of those who had vanished. He found a small hidden key taped to the wall near B0. His hands trembling, he tried it on the lock. The door creaked open.
A cold gust swept out.
Inside was a narrow staircase descending into darkness.
Shio hesitated.
Then stepped inside. Down the stairs, he found a room filled with old photographs.
Pages of Tenant 롱간.
Names crossed out. Memories frozen in time. At the center was a mirror. When Theo looked in, he saw his reflection. But it was pale.
Almost transparent.
And behind him,
The girl from 7B.
her stitched eyes fixed on him. He whispered, "I'm still here." Her mouth moved. Not for long. The mirror shattered. Glass rained down. Theo stumbled backward. He knew the building wanted him gone.
Hirambe upstairs.
His steps echoed in the empty halls. Outside his door, a fresh note taped to the wall.
Last warning.
Forget, or be forgotten.
Shio's hands shook.
He grabbed the notebook, wrote one final line. "If you find this, remember me. I was here." He sat down, waiting, fading, until...
The all of shadows.
The first time Theo noticed the shadows, it was almost morning. He had dozed off in the corner of his apartment, seated on the floor with his back against the cold wall, a thick black marker still clutched in his fingers. Words were scrawled across every visible surface: his name, his apartment number, fragments of memories, mom cinnamon tea, first kiss, parking lot, the cat with one green eye. He'd been writing to remember. But when sunlight crept through the curtains, something else caught his eye. It moved. Not quickly. Not with menace. Just shifted. On the far wall, above the radiator, the faint outline of a figure stretched long and thin, rippling as though cast by a light that didn't exist.
Shio blinked hard.
The morning sun was too soft to cast such a defined shape. He looked behind him. Nothing there to create the shadow. He looked back.
The silhouette was gone.
By noon, more shadows appeared. Not in motion yet, but clearly human. Impossibly so. They lined the north-facing wall now, almost like charcoal smudges that no amount of cleaning could scrub away. Some were short. One appeared to be clutching something like a child. Another had a long coat. One sat curled in the fetal position, arms wrapped tightly around themselves. Theo stared in disbelief. They weren't painted. They weren't tricks of the light. They were memories. Echoes burned into plaster. Tenants. Former residents.
The once who'd vanished.
Now here. On his wall. He set up his camera. Let it record for hours. When he reviewed the footage, he saw something impossible. From 3:03 a.m. to 3:06 a.m., the shadows moved, shifted positions, rearranged themselves. And then, at exactly 3:06 and 47 seconds a.m., one of them a tall man with a slouched posture turned toward the camera, and waved. Theo dropped the camera.
It clattered to the floor.
He backed away from the wall, heart slamming against his ribs. His breath turned ragged. The shadow man had waved.
난 마인드러슬리.
Not randomly, but directly at him. At the lens. For the first time in weeks, Theo left the apartment without shoes, stumbling into the hallway with panic swirling in his chest. The corridor looked wrong. Longer than before. There were too many doors. Too many numbers. He ran past 3D, 3E, 3F, 3G. When had there ever been a 3G? The hallway folded in on itself like a maze, until he arrived back in front of his door despite running straight. He stared at his doorknob. It pulsed. Once.
Like a heartbeat.
He didn't sleep that night. He pushed the couch against the shadow wall.
헝 블랭키츠 오버히트.
Drew crosses on the dry wall with salt and charcoal. But it didn't matter. At 3:06 a.m., the couch dragged itself 3 inches to the left. The blanket fluttered to the ground.
And the shadows shifted again.
The one who waved now stood in the center. Closer. His features became slightly clearer. Not detailed still flat black, but Theo could feel the grin beneath the dark. It wasn't friendly. It was familiar. Like the building itself was learning how to smile. Theo opened his journal and began to document. July 19th. Shadows now permanent. Appear only on northern wall. Resemble residents from building ledger. One interacts. Waved. Shifted. Not bound by physics. Not reflections. Possible recording of trauma? Trapped echoes? Is the building showing them to me? Or warning me that I'm next? He added one final line. Do not let the shadow wave again. The next night, he taped blackout curtains over the wall. Duct taped the seams. Covered it with a bookshelf. He piled furniture in front of it, chairs, his bed frame, boxes full of old notebooks. Then, exhausted, he curled up in the bathtub. He dreamed of the shadow man. Except in the dream it wasn't a shadow. It was himself. Standing where the silhouette stood. Waving back. Theo screamed himself awake. His mirror was fogged despite the cold. Written across it, in his own handwriting. You're already on the wall. He ran to the living room and tore down the curtains. The wall was still there. Shadows still standing. And now there was one more. A new one. In the same shape, same size, same posture as him. He stumbled back in horror. The shadow's right hand was raised in a slow, static wave. Exactly like in the video. He checked the footage again. Frame by frame. And yes, this time, he was in it. Not the shadow.
지호.
Standing beside the others. Waving at himself. Panic flooded his chest. He scribbled notes, stuck them all over the apartment.
You are not a shadow.
You are alive. You exist. He called out, hoping someone would hear him. No answer.
Just the building creaking.
Like bones settling. Hours passed. Every time he blinked, the wall seemed closer. Like it was inching toward him. The figures now looked slightly darker. More dimensional. More aware. Then the one shaped like him turned its head. Not the whole body, just the head. It looked at him. Theo screamed, backed into the hallway, slammed the door behind him. He ran for the stairs. Not the elevator. The elevator had rules. He took the stairs 2 at a time, gasping, desperate to reach the lobby. But when he reached the bottom, the sign on the wall didn't say lobby. It said,
Welcome home, 시오.
The wall beside the stairwell rippled, like heat above asphalt. And then, with a low groan, part of it darkened, shifting into a silhouette. His silhouette. The wall was making him.
He bolted back upstairs. Hot hammering. Lungs on fire.
His apartment door stood open. The shadows waiting inside like stage actors mid-curtain call. He slammed the door shut, turned every lock. But the locks didn't matter anymore.
Paul was inside.
That night, he sat against the bathroom door,
노트북 in hand.
writing what might be his final entry.
I don't know if I'm real anymore. Paul remembers me better than I do.
Every time I blink, I see myself waving. He closed the notebook, taped it under the sink. If someone ever found it, he hoped they would understand.
The lights flickered.
The apartment groaned. Then, a whisper, not from inside the walls but from the shadow version of him. Welcome to the wall. Theo turned to the northern wall. It pulsed. And this time, all the silhouettes turned to look at him. Not waving now.
Just watching.
Waiting. He raised his hand. Unintentionally.
A reflex.
As if answering a mirror. He waved back.
더 올 심어드.
A new shadow appeared, perfectly matching his pose. Even the fingers bent the same way. He stepped forward. So did it.
스텝 포 스텝.
When he placed his hand against the wall.
더 올 펠트 오엄.
Like skin. Or memory.
or something alive.
And then he heard it. Hundreds of voices whispering in unison. We remember you.
오전 3시 11분. Again.
He tries to leave, but the clock resets to 3:11 a.m. every time he packs. Time loops. The hallway grows longer. Theo had made up his mind. He would leave the Merrow tonight. No more waiting. No more notes. No more walls whispering his name. He had packed the essentials, the tattered journal, a bundle of clothes, 3 bottles of water, and all the photos he'd printed of the shadow wall. Every memory he could carry. He didn't dare try the elevator rule 4. Avoid the elevator, so he planned to take the stairs all the way down, out through the lobby, and into the nearest cab without looking back. It was 2:53 a.m. He checked his watch 3 times to be sure. He slung the bag over his shoulder. The hallway was quiet. The walls, for once, didn't groan. He stepped out of the apartment and locked the door behind him. Just before he turned to the stairwell, he whispered, "Goodbye."
To the building.
To himself. To the memory of who he was before. The stairs were longer than he remembered. The first flight was fine. So was the second. But by the third, the air grew dense. Each step felt harder than the last, like walking underwater. By the time he reached the ground floor, sweat clung to his back. His legs trembled slightly, and he was sure he hadn't climbed down this many steps when he'd first moved in. He reached for the doorknob to the lobby. It turned. He stepped out, back onto the 3rd floor. He froze. His hand was still on the doorknob, but the hallway in front of him was unmistakable. The wallpaper with the coffee-stained bloom near 3E.
The burnt out light above 3C.
The door to his own apartment, now slightly ajar. He turned his wrist to look at the time.
3:11 nachts.
No.
No.
He rushed back into the stairwell and ran down again, faster this time. He counted every step, every landing. Past the 2nd floor, then 1st, then ground. He slammed his shoulder against the lobby door. And once again. Third floor. His knees nearly gave out. He staggered to the wall and slid down, breathing hard. The hallway lights flickered in sync with his panic. He looked at his watch again. Still 3:11 a.m. Not 3:12. Not 3:13. He pulled out his phone.
3:11 nachts.
레프타프. 오전 3시 11분. The All Clock Above 3D. 오전 3시 11분.
Time wasn't just stuck.
It was looping.
And the building knew he was trying to leave. He stood up, dizzy. The hallway felt longer. Stretched. Where before there were 5 doors between the stairwell and his apartment, now there were at least 8. 10. 12. The numbers were wrong too. 3A. 3B.
3C, 3D.
Then 3E. 3F. 3A again. Then 3Z. Then just a symbol. He walked, fast now, past door after door, each one slightly more warped than the last. Paint peeled in strips. Handles melted like wax.
원도어 헤드 아이즈.
He didn't stop. The hallway bent slightly to the left. Then to the right. It spiraled. Soon, Theo was walking in circles, his breath ragged, the bag heavy on his shoulder. Every time he turned, his apartment door appeared again. Sometimes it was open. Sometimes closed. Sometimes there was no door number at all. He screamed into the silence. "Let me go." His voice bounced off the walls, absorbed, not echoed. Something in the ceiling creaked, almost in amusement. The hallway lights dimmed to a warm red glow. He looked at his watch.
3:11 nachts.
So. He dropped his bag and turned to the wall. Pounded his fists against it. "Let me go." Nothing.
No whisper.
No movement. But the shadows were back. Faint outlines stretched along the far wall, barely visible in the dim light. All turned toward him. Then, from down the hall, a voice. "It's not the building. It's you." Theo turned sharply. A figure stood at the edge of the bend in the hallway. Backlit. No face. Just a suit. Long arms.
A paint shadow of a man.
Theo stepped forward. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head. "You've stayed too long. It's always 3:11 for those who don't leave in time." "I tried to leave," Theo shouted.
Don't let me.
"We don't hold you here."
You loop yourself.
That stopped him. What does that mean? The figure took one slow step forward. "You wrote your name on the walls. You carved your existence into the wood. You let the building remember you. That makes you part of it now." Theo's blood turned cold. Was that true? Was it his fault? "You mocked yourself," the voice said. "You stayed past your welcome. You searched too deep."
Now you loop.
He backed away. The hallway stretched again, longer than before. He ran straight this time, not caring where it led. Doors rushed past on either side, some open, revealing blackness. Others filled with static like broken TVs. One room was full of water.
Another. 클락스.
Each one ticked 3:11. Every single one. His legs burned, lungs aching. Finally, he tripped and crashed to the floor. The carpet was gone. Now concrete.
Et.
Cold. He was in a different hallway now. Basement? No.
Something deeper.
Underground. Ahead, a massive door stood. Twice the height of a normal one. carved with hundreds of names, some scratched out, some fading.
원 스틸 프레시. 지옥.
He crawled toward it, weak now. His hand brushed the surface. The door opened. Inside, nothing.
언 어비스. 에이슬로. 위스퍼링 험 컬드 프롬 더 보이.
Like a choir of sighs.
히린드 클로서.
He heard something faint. His own voice. Echoing back.
으 알쇼.
You live. You exist. You remember. Words he'd recorded. Written. Clung to. Now whispered by something else. The figure appeared beside him again.
스테프 스루. 조인 유어 메모리즈.
Or walk back, and loop forever. Theo turned. Behind him, the hallway again. Still lit. Still long. Still marked 3:11 a.m. He had to choose. He looked into the void. Then at his hands. They were translucent. Fading. His reflection in a shard of glass showed only his outline. He was almost shadow now. "Will I die?" he asked. The figure said nothing. Then slowly nodded. Yes. But not completely.
Theo stood.
Wobbled. He reached into his bag. Pulled out the photo of his mother. Held it to his chest. He looked into the void. Then whispered.
Remember me.
And stepped through. The clock stopped.
3:12 nachts.
The hallway shrank back to normal length. The third floor returned.
더 섀도즈 페이디드. 더 라이츠 스타프트 플리커링.
The whispers grew quiet. Room 3A was empty the next morning. No belongings. No markings. Even the door number was gone. Just clean beige paint. As though no one had ever lived there. But in the basement mailbox, someone found a slip of paper.
If you live here, never write your name.
And beneath it, one final line. Theo was here. Please remember me. My name's on the ledger now. The Merrow was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't just happen when the tenants were asleep, but the kind that settled after something irreversible had occurred. Like silence after a scream. Theo hadn't stepped out of his apartment since 3:11 a.m. changed to 3:12. That shift in time had felt like the building exhaling, like something ancient had been waiting for him to make a choice, and he'd finally made it. He was still here. He hadn't disappeared like the others. But something felt different. Not wrong, exactly. Just final. That morning, Theo walked into the hallway with a strange weight in his chest. Not grief. Not fear. Something heavier than both.
Something like inevitability.
He passed door 3D. Then 3E. Then what should have been 3F. Instead, there was a blank doorno number. No knob, no peephole. It pulsed softly, like it had a heartbeat. He kept walking. The hall lights were steady now. Too steady. And the elevator, for the first time in months, dinged softly as it arrived at the third floor. Its door slid open, revealing nothing but clean walls and a glowing button for the lobby.
No whispering. No flickering.
No rules posted. Almost like it wanted him to ride. He didn't. Theo headed to the basement. There were questions still unanswered. And he needed to see the ledger. He passed the mailboxes. Still dusty. Still silent. His name was gone again from 3A. The brass slot, no letters. Just absence. Like the building was done pretending. The door to the locked office behind the boiler where Mrs. E's journal had once been hidden was already open. Waiting. Inside, nothing had changed. The air was still thick with mold and memory. The single exposed light bulb above the desk buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the papers scattered on the surface. And there it was.
더 테넌트 레저.
Still open. Still ink-stained. Still alive in a way books shouldn't be. Theo approached it like one might approach a casket. He looked down. Page after page of names, each line with 2 notations. Move-in date. Final status. Some had normal dates and moved out, stamped cleanly. Others said, erased. Some were just black lines. Others had no status at all. Just names. Fading. Blurring. He flipped through the pages, careful not to breathe too hard. There was Alma from 2F. Her name now completely smudged, like someone had tried to wipe her off the page with wet fingers. Jason from 5C. Erased. Mrs. Ethy Tenant, who'd left the journal her name, was underlined in red. A rare detail. Her status. Remembered. Temporary. Theo kept turning. He reached the final page.
블랭의 퍼스트.
Then, as if reacting to his presence, ink began to blossom across the parchment. A name wrote itself, letter by letter. His.
Theo Lan.
Unit 3A. Move in. April 1st. Status. He held his breath. And then it appeared. 2 lines formed. Not stamped.
카어브드.
Crossed out. He stumbled back. The light above him flickered for the first time in days. The room swayed. It was happening. The Merrow had made its choice. He reached for the ledger. Tried to tear the page out. But his fingers passed through the paper.
나 라익 스목. 나 라익 매직.
It was worse. The book didn't recognize him as real anymore. He backed away, panic clawing at his ribs. Then the whispers started again. Low. All around.
프롬 더 올즈.
The pipes. The floor. Whispers that knew his name now.
Theo Lan. Theo Lan.
You stayed too long. He turned to run. The basement hallway was longer. Again.
저스트 라익 더 3시 11분 루프.
Only now there was no clock. No time. No direction. The air grew colder the further he walked. Lights blinked out behind him one by one. Then came the doors. Dozens of them. All different sizes. None had handles. But each had something scratched into the wood. Not names. Not numbers. Dates. Each door marked with a date. Some from decades ago. Some far in the future. And one had today's date. July 4th. He stopped. Touched the door. It opened. Inside was his apartment. Perfectly recreated. Down to the torn couch cushion. The crooked lamp.
더 스크래치즈 히드 메이드 인 더 월.
But everything was cleaner. Preserved. Museum-like. Like a replica of what had already been lost. He stepped inside. His own voice echoed around him. July 4th. Last entry. He turned. His journal lay open on the table. But it wasn't the copy he'd written. It was newer. The ink was fresh. And it was still writing itself. July 4th.
Theo Lan.
Moved in. April 1st. Tried to leave. July 11th. Loop broke. Time caught him. Final action. Entered his door. Status. Written. He tried to scream. But his voice had no sound now. He ran to the door. It wouldn't open. He banged on the walls. The couch was bolted down.
더 미러 reflected nothing.
He turned back to the journal. One more line appeared. The building remembers better than people do. The shadows returned. Soft at first, then full-bodied. Familiar faces. Tenants who were gone.
알머,
Mrs. E. Even the stitched-mouthed girl from 7B. They stood silently in the corners. Not angry.
난 모험패.
Just still. Watching. Like he was the new exhibit. Theo slumped against the wall. He stared at his reflection in the window now barely visible. His outline flickered. And then his shape flattened. Blackened.
A 새도.
He remembered Rule 8. If your name is scratched out, run. He hadn't. He stayed. And now, the ledger had decided. The room faded around him. The couch vanished. The lights dimmed. The apartment was gone. Replaced by a blank hallway. And at the end of it, a new door. Marked Lang T. He walked toward it, slow now. He didn't resist. Not anymore. He reached for the knob. Turned it.
Inside an empty white room. A single table.
And on it, the ledger. Still open. He sat down across from it. Pages fluttered on their own. Until they stopped. On the final name. Fresh ink. No mistake.
Theo Lang.
Unit 3A.
스테터스. source CD out.
He stared at it for a long time. And in the blank space below, new text began to write itself. Every tenant in this apartment goes missing. But not all of them are gone. Some become part of the building. Some stay in the walls.
Some write a ledger.
Theo reached for the pen. This time, it didn't pass through his fingers. It landed in his hand like it had always belonged there. And beneath the last name, the ledger prompted him.
Next TNANT.
He hesitated. Then slowly, he wrote. Unknown. Moving in July 5th. He didn't need to know their name. The building would tell him. The lights blinked once.
A soft creak echoed through the halls.
A suitcase rolled across the lobby upstairs. Someone new was coming. Theo closed the book. Looked up. And for the first time in hours, he smiled. Not because he was free, but because he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Final panel. Theo flips back to the first page of the ledger. The ink moves like veins under skin. Then he turns to the last page. The final name.
Theo Lang.
Crossed out. But etched beneath it, faint and final, are the words.
Still here.